In general, one can say that the statistics of anti-Semitic crimes in Sweden disclose that there has been something of a 50% increase in the last 10 years or so. A steady increase of these kinds of crime. It's hard to talk about absolute numbers. First of all, because the absolute numbers are relatively small, and also because the number of unreported anti-Semitic incidents is high. If one were to ask Jews in the Jewish communities in Sweden, almost all of them know somebody or have themselves been subject to this kind of attacks over the last 5 years or so. But very, very few actually go to the police, because there's really no point in going to the police. There won't be any real investigation into the crime, and honestly, it would just ruin the rest of the day. So for that reason, it's really risky to say too much about how common these kinds of incidents are. However, one can still point to the increase in reported crimes. So the trend is towards the growing problem over here. As I said, the metropolitan areas of the three larger cities, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö, are the most affected by this problem, especially Malmö, where the Muslim population is especially large compared to the population in general. Anti-Semitic incidents, they include attacks on synagogues, for instance, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish-owned businesses to a certain extent, when it's known that the perpetrator is going after Jews, and also individual Jews are attacked in the street. Just on an anecdotal basis, I can, for instance, tell you about an incident in Malmö, where I live, where the new Jewish cemetery is located very close to one of these suburbs with a high percentage of Muslim and Arab immigrants, where last spring some workers from the county were pelted with rocks when they were mowing the lawn on the cemetery. These were Christian county workers just mowing the lawn, and but they were attacked for mowing the lawn on the Jewish cemetery. It's right nearby in the area called Rosengård. The best known anti-Semitic incident in Sweden, however, is it took place on April 18, 2002, when an anti-racist manifestation in Stockholm, organized by the Liberal Party's youth organization, was attacked by a passing anti-Israel demonstration, which was heading for the Israeli embassy in Stockholm. And the people who were taking part in this anti-racist manifestation, it was a manifestation against racism in general, and against anti-Semitism, and against Islamophobia. And they'd made a point out of making it broad, and also of not including anything connected to Israel. So there were no Israeli flags, no banners or anything talking about the Middle Eastern conflict. It was focusing solely on the situation in Sweden. And they were attacked by 20 or so people from the anti-Israel demonstration. And they were accused of being Jews, and they were physically attacked, and the police had to be called in. Now, that means that this is a problem that exists in Sweden, and it is on the rise. However, the perception in public and the public debate about it is quite different. One can see that the pattern of anti-Semitism among some Arabs and Muslims in Sweden is the same. It's similar to the one we can see in other European countries. It's later, as I said, and it hasn't really developed to the point where it is today in many other European countries, with a larger Muslim or Arab population. However, the trend is similar. The one thing that is different in Sweden, however, is how the problem is dealt with, or rather how it's not dealt with. Because the problem is that it's not. there is very little public debate on the issue. And there might be public debate, and there has been, at least over the last 2 years or so, a growing awareness of the fact that this is a problem, or at least a growing awareness of the fact that there is a debate about whether this is a problem or not. However, there are three principal obstacles in discussing anti-Semitism among Arabs and Muslims in Sweden. The first of this is, as was already mentioned, that anti-Semitism in Sweden is perceived as a exclusively neo-Nazi phenomenon. In Swedish public discourse, people don't grasp that other people than Nazis can be anti-Semitic, and it's a clear proof of this is the fact the security police, SÄPO, which registers anti-Semitic crimes and incidents, only register the motive behind the crime if the perpetrator was a neo-Nazi. In any other, if he had any other kind of identity, the crime is considered to be a coincidence or something considering this particular individual and not worthwhile registering because it's not a societal pattern of some kind. The fact that only about a third of the anti-Semitic crimes in Sweden can be referred to neo-Nazi groups is not something that they've taken into account here. So there's a problem in the statistics that is published by the security police. The second obstacle is the fact that Arabs and Muslims in Sweden are themselves subjected to discriminating policies and racism in Swedish society. This leads to an attitude where people claim that no, they can't be racists because people are discriminating against them. Of course they can't be racists. Or on a slightly more sophisticated level, it's said that yes, of course they can be racists. However, criticism against the Muslim and Arab community in Sweden will lead to more racism and discriminating policies against them. So we'd better not talk about it. Now, the third and I think leading component or leading obstacle to discussing anti-Semitism in Sweden is the political dimension. It's hard to, I mean, it's easy to see if you look for it, but it's hard to find clear proof of the political influence here. However, generally, socialists and communists in Sweden are loath to talk about anti-Semitism because they see the connection between Jews and the Jewish communities in Sweden and the State of Israel. The Jewish communities in Sweden are generally very supportive of the State of Israel, obviously. And they see the State of Israel as connected to the US. And since they don't like the US, they don't approve of Israeli policies or in some cases even the existence of the State of Israel. And also they identify very strongly with the Palestinians because they see the PLO as a progressive movement. Nominally, the PLO is, in fact, in case you didn't know, a socialist movement, and they're even members of the Socialist International, as far as I know. And they figure prominently on international socialist meetings, not only in Sweden, but all over Europe. And so they see Israel, the United States, standing against this progressive third world people struggling for decolonization, etc., and then they see the Jews in Sweden attacking these progressive third world individuals living in Sweden. This political dimension, or illusion even, has a bearing on the media climate in Sweden because a large majority of Swedish journalists tend to have socialist or communist leanings. This is something supported by repeated polls made by the Union of Journalists themselves in their newspaper, or their magazine rather, published monthly. at least before every election, but I think annually, they held poll of their members and what party they sympathize with. Now, the Reformed Communist Party in Sweden has about 6% of the votes in general elections. But according to these polls in the magazine called Journalisten, about 30% of Swedish journalists vote for the Reformed Communist Party. And taken together, the left-wing side of the Swedish political spectrum has about 75% of journalists in Greece. Now, of course, nobody really knows what they vote for on election day, but at least this is an indication to their leanings, I think. A consequence of this, with regards to anti-Semitism, is that there is a tone of minimalizing or excusing this kind of behavior in the media. There's a lot of yes, buts. Yes, buts. Maybe it exists, but we have to take into account this or this or this. There are even some no's. The most famous one is probably a prominent Swedish journalist called Jan Guillou. He is something of a hero to Swedish journalists because he uncovered the Swedish Watergate affair, one would say, in the 70s, and he was even put to jail for it for a great period of time. And he's one of the leading journalists in Sweden, and he has repeatedly written in his column in the largest Swedish daily called Aftonbladet, which is a social democratic paper, that there is really no anti-Semitism in Sweden. It's a historical problem. It doesn't really apply to today's condition. And if there is any kind of racism, it's against Muslims and Arabs. And any talk of anti-Semitism in Sweden today, especially Muslim or Arab anti-Semitism, is just evasive tactics on the part of the Jewish communities on behalf of the State of Israel to get the interest away from the real problem, which is Israeli occupation and colonialist policies. There is actually one last reaction of the press, and that is, yes, and it's justified. It's very rare, and but it was expressed by an Islamologist from Stockholm University called Jan Samuelsson as a response to my research on anti-Semitism among Muslims and Arabs in Sweden. He published an article in the largest Swedish morning paper saying that, yes, there is anti-Semitism among Muslims and Arabs in Sweden, and it's completely justified, I understand it, because of Israeli policies. Most other Islamologists in Sweden, however, take a completely different view. They sometimes might tend towards the yes but usually they minimize or even deny the existence of the problem at all. The most famous Islamologists in this respect in Sweden are Mattias Gardell and Jan Järpe, who basically, at least on a weekly basis, they're interviewed in Swedish media now, and has been since September the 11th. When bringing up the yes but response to anti-Semitism among Muslims and Arabs in Sweden, usually the apologists of this kind of behavior say that, yes, but you see, they're young. They're just young men. They're frustrated. Boys will be boys. Or we, the Swedish society, frustrate them, and so they channel their aggression against someone. It's not really, it's because of our behavior. Or they would say, yes, but it's because of Israel's policies. It's Israel that enraged them. So it's only natural that they would go after the Jews. In fact, the only people that I've encountered in the Swedish public discourse who voice any kind of criticism against anti-Semitism among Muslims and Arabs, actually, it doesn't come from journalists, it doesn't come from Islamologists, but it comes from secular Muslims who are integrated into Swedish society. One of the most famous ones is the president of the Women's Association of the Social Democratic Party. Her name is Nalin Pekul, and she's a Kurdish Muslim, secular, but of a Muslim background, a Kurd, who has repeatedly spoken out against anti-Semitism among Muslims and Arabs in Sweden. There are some other secular Muslim journalists in Sweden who, over the last year, especially this summer, I don't recall the exact date, they made some undercover work that was very interesting. When they went to the Great Mosque in Stockholm and also to another mosque in Uppsala, which is a city north of Stockholm with a large university. And they listened to sermons delivered by imams there in Arabic, and then wrote about it in large Swedish dailies. And this was very embarrassing for the Muslim community, because the Muslim community as a whole has always denied any existence of anti-Semitism in Sweden. And also this summer, another incident. After the terror attack in London in July, the most well-known imam of the Great Mosque of Stockholm, he condemned this terror attack in one of his Friday sermons. And he made a point out of condemning it and not going the yes, the no, but. Because always there is condemnation from the Muslim community in Sweden, but they always add a but. Yes, but we have to understand that. And then there's some kind of apologetic nullification almost of the condemnation of this kind of attacks. But he made a point out of saying, there will be no more buts. This is not acceptable. And immediately threats against his life was made by his congregants. And he was called a Jew and many other things. And this has stirred something of a public debate among Muslims in the Swedish press, or at least it did over the summer. Now it's, I haven't seen any traces of it lately. In conclusion, one can say that the problem of anti-Semitism among Arabs and Muslims in Sweden is established. We see the trend growing, and we see the pattern repeating itself from other European countries. The general public is still unaware or unwilling to recognize the fact that this isn't a problem at all. There are many reasons for this, but the main obstacle to a clear debate about the problem is probably the political dimension of and the implications of world policies. There has, however, as I said, been some positive steps in moderate and secular Muslims in Sweden actually talking about the problem. And hopefully this means that leftists and others among the journalists and Islamologists can no longer call this Zionist propaganda or minimize it by saying that yes, but it's a youth phenomenon, etc., it's a poverty related, etc. Because now, all of a sudden, hopefully, not only the Jews will discuss the problem. And as I see it, the first step to come to terms with this kind of problem is to recognize it. And hopefully, this new debate will continue, and there will be a growing awareness of the problem. And down the line, I don't know, hopefully, it could be dealt with in a more serious manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for this sad, very, very sad overview. By the way, there is in an essay form on part of this problem on our Jerusalem Center P&A website. You can find an essay from the Jewish Political Studies Review. I'll take questions. I want to make one remark because it's from the last few days. One of the leftist members of parliament, you have translated that for us, in fact didn't want to condemn the Iranian president and tried to say that she had a certain sympathy for his position. That was condemned by the other parliamentarians involved, but that still shows where the Swedish left potentially stand. I have so far three questions. Chaim Hannah Givon, and Izzy Liebler. Any more? Yosef Hakim, young Dr. Efraim Zur. Rabbi Moshe Edelman. Good. We do sorry, Dr. Cohen Stewart. We do it like we do it the first three questions together, because you have some paper to write here. Okay. Chaim, please.
Thank you for a very informative lecture. I used to follow this issue in Sweden. We helped even create a center in Lund, near the campus, directed by Jaap Schatz. And it did a very good job because Sweden was one of the first European countries to introduce the study of the Holocaust in all schools, in the curriculum of all Swedish schools. It gave a very good example for other countries. But usually the community was more active and was ready to react to every anti-Semitic propaganda. You didn't speak at all about the community's reactions. So can we hear about how does it affect the Jews, and especially the Jewish institutions?
Hannah?
Yes, what is the Jewish population of Sweden and the Muslim population, and is the Muslim growth as large as it is in other areas? Proportionate.
Easy?
Partly you already questioned. I want to get the impact on the Jewish community and the responses of the Jewish community, and perhaps also, is there an evangelical Christian element that's making itself felt at all?
Yes, those were the three first questions?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to comment on Holocaust studies. Yes, there is quite a lot of Holocaust studies in schools, as you pointed out. However, it's hard to see any bearing on the study of the Holocaust on this issue, because people don't make the connection. If they at all see it as a part of a larger problem of today, or anti-Semitism is something that exists in Sweden today, because one studies the Holocaust, it actually enforces the idea that anti-Semitism is a Nazi phenomenon or right-wing phenomenon, and it really has no bearing on this particular issue, and so that doesn't really help. Although this means it's an indication of the fact that there isn't really. It says something about the level of anti-Semitism in general, in the general public in Sweden, and one could say that when it comes to this kind of issues, it's not a problem. People are not against the study of the Holocaust as such, but it doesn't really help with regards to contemporary anti-Semitism in Sweden. Now, as for the effect of on the Jewish communities, obviously it has an effect. The level of security arrangements on Swedish synagogues and community centers is high. One cannot just walk into any of them. They're all, if one would like to daven in shul, for instance,